Devin Miller and Miguel Iturrate back here on the Cage Rage podcast, and this is CRP number 85, and we are going to be recapping UFC 237 and Bellator 221, which are now in the books. We have a lot to talk about here. Miguel, how you doing? These were two good cards. I did get through Bellator. It took me a little longer. I saw the results before I got to actually watch the event, unfortunately, but did get through them. We have a lot to talk about with these five main cards, with five main fights from these two cards that we covered in the pre-fight. A lot of fallout, I believe, with these five fights.
I agree with you. Exciting night of fights on the MMA side. Boxing calendar was loaded as well, so really hard to keep up along the way. And I'm glad to catch up with you now to do the MMA side. And in terms of Brazil, obviously, let's focus on the main event first. You got Rose Namajunas taking on Jessica Andrade. It was an interesting fight on paper. And, we had both picked Namajunas, I believe, and it was playing out perfectly. It just, all kind of fell apart, a few rounds too early. And Andrade won with a huge slam. And, it's definitely, like a highlight reel type of moment. And, she knows she wants a rematch with Namajunas. She knows that she was getting beat up in that fight. Namajunas, in the post-fight interviews, it was interesting as ever.
Yeah, we definitely do have a new strawweight queen, but what you just said about Rose Namajunas, we have a lot to talk about with there because her mental state, I think, is probably the thing that's the most concerning about her. We've seen this after the whole infamous Conor McGregor bus attack. I mentioned that in the pre-fight about how she supposedly was really shooken up over that, had to do some counseling. She's made it known before that she's had some anxiety issues and depression issues and different kind of mental issues. And she's also made it known that she really just wants to make enough money, buy a big farm, and go off into the sunset and live her life in peace. She doesn't seem to be one that really enjoys the limelight too much. I think it's very disappointing because she is a great fighter, and we saw her really boxing Andrade up. She looked like the longer fighter. She had great extension on her punches. Her footwork was excellent. She just made the mistake of holding on to a Kimura. This was the second time in the fight that she had done this. She got picked up and dropped in the first round, managed to roll through in the transition and get back up to her feet. She tried to play that same hold on to the Kimura to defend the takedown against the cage in the second round, and Andrade just showed that she doesn't care. She's in this to hurt you, and she might have given you a rose and a hug at the weigh-in, but she's not your friend, and she'll dump you straight on your head and break your neck if she has to. I thought this was one of the scariest finishes that I've seen in UFC history because I was really concerned with the way Rose fell on the angle on her neck. I think that's going to be a subject of conversation. A lot of people are wondering how this didn't fall into the pile driver category. But do you believe that kind of a slam directly on someone's neck, straight down, should be legal?
I do, because the bottom line is you said it in the start of the conversation. Rose made a choice, and she was actively fighting. If she chose to not actively defend herself from that slam, she was still pursuing an arm lock, and looking for the fight. So you can't say she wasn't in the fight. Thankfully, her interviews afterwards, she seems a little like she may not want to fight and stuff, but that's always been there with her. She did seem lucid, though. She didn't seem like she was, how old are you? 5, 6, 7 years old, where she's going to give incoherent answers and stuff. So that's a good thing. And I don't think I think Andrade, deserves credit for the power that she has, and for when it didn't work the first time, try it again, and the second time it worked. That's what fighting's about. She won about 30 seconds of that fight, so she's the UFC's champion now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this: a name that nobody's mentioning, that this will make Chad happy. and other Joanna fanboys, the person who this really benefits, I think, is Joanna Jędrzejczyk, because she was in a situation where we didn't know really where she was going to go. The 125 attempt was failed. She lost a bunch of kickboxing matches to Valentina and really got handed in her attempt to go up and try to fight her in an MMA fight for that 25 belt. She's kind of been in limbo. She's already had 2 technical losses on the book to Rose Namajunas. It was probably going to be a long climb back up there. I don't know about you, Miguel, but I left that fight last night with no confidence that Jessica Andrade has made the improvements necessary to beat Joanna now even more. Like Joanna, Rose was pulling off exactly what Joanna did to Jessica Andrade by being the longer fighter, having really good extension on her strikes, better footwork. I saw Jessica Andrade hitting air. She never really landed anything solid on Rose. She was getting pecked apart in every combination, and she is a very persistent girl, very straightforward, in your face powerhouse. Everybody knows that. And if somebody doesn't have the footwork to deal with it, there's a good chance they're going to get their head knocked off or get dumped on their head. Rose made a simple mistake and almost paid for it with her life, with her neck snapping in half. But she lost the belt. She's no longer the champion. But I see that style still beats Jessica Andrade. And I think that there's a chance we see if Rose really doesn't want to come back, I think there's a chance Joanna was the big winner last night that could end up possibly wearing that gold again if she gets a fight with Jessica Andrade.
I think that would be an interesting twist, and it would make sense as well. Andrade has that black mark to clean up, and Judge Usyk, as you stated, is kind of looking for a place, and that would be a good place. It puts her right back in the title picture, even if I see Rose deserving some time off, and we probably won't see her for a while. We'll see what materializes for her, and I wish her well. I understand what I kind of understand her talk. She's gifted at this, and she's pursuing it. But just like a CEO who's not happy working for a big bank and wants to go off and start his own company, kind of thing. She's got other plans for her life too, so you have to respect that. And we'll see. She kind of a little bit of that flow case started with Rory McDonald a couple of weeks ago, no?
Yeah, this second case in a row, and I wonder if we're going to see more of that, and maybe for the better, because when we look at 2 guys that fought 2 legends of the sport that fought this weekend, and Anderson Silva and BJ Penn, you're seeing 2 men that have really held on too long, and maybe some of these fighters, we're going to start seeing more of them take more of a pathway out earlier in their career to save themselves the health issues later in life and make their money, get their name out there, and then ride off in the sunset while they're still somewhat intact before they become a laughingstock later in their career or take too many injuries. So maybe it's not, this is her life. We're fans of the sport, and I enjoy watching her fight, but she needs to do what's best for her. And on a human level, we need to support her in that decision. And we have no idea what it's like, the pressure that she's going through, especially if she's somebody that doesn't even really feel comfortable in large groups and around large crowds. So we really don't know what she's even dealing with mentally.
Yeah, her anxiety hits on a bunch of different levels. Now imagine like the intrusiveness of the level she's fighting at, and it just the Veda testing that they could show up at any time, and her and Pat, after this fight, for example, they may want to take a break. Hey, we're gonna go on vacation. Let's go to somewhere nice, New Zealand, somewhere far away where we won't really be known and stuff like that. They actually have to make themselves available in New Zealand for Veda to show up. They have no there is no privacy for a fighter of that level anymore. Because here they could want to get away and they still have to subject themselves to being followed around, or that a doctor could show up and ask them for, and to, that's just one little facet. Aside from, Rose is a pretty girl too, and with the shaved head, she's very kind of distinctive looking. So I imagine she's probably at the point where she gets stopped in malls, and said hello to, and too many times with autographs and that sort of stuff. That's not for everybody. And so it is interesting. You know what I mean? She's small, so, it's not like, wow, look, Michael Jordan's walking down the mall or anything like that. So she could maybe still have some anonymity, but a lot of that's probably gone for her. Not at the level she wants, not the level someone like her wants. But for Andrade, we haven't really talked about her. Yeah, I could easily see her losing the belt in her first defense. She stayed with it in the fight and, deserves credit. But it's funny seeing the interviews because, like I said, Rose was lucid. She didn't take any punishment in that fight except for the slam. And Andrade was looking beat up after the fight.
Yeah, she was. And I think you're right. I think Andrade could lose a rematch to Rose. I think she could lose a second fight to Joanna. I think she could lose to somebody like Tatiana Suarez, who's coming up in the ranks, who is a very strong, heavy grappler. So she's got her hands full in a very good division. But going back to Rose Namajunas, though, another thing to consider with her in her mindset is, and this might not be PC, politically correct, but she's a woman. And she's a happily married woman at that. She might want to go start a family. And she's young, and, she might have and we know that takes a lot of that. We can't imagine as men what that takes, what that demands on a human body to go through a 9-month pregnancy. I mean, that takes a lot of time. And we were talking about that with the TJ Dillashaw suspension. Time is money in this game now. This game's evolving so fast that even just taking a year and a half off to go have a kid and get yourself back in shape, that demands a lot. Yep. And so I'm supportive of whatever this young woman does. I think she's a great fighter. I think she can easily hold that strap again. I think she can be a big star in the sport. But if she doesn't want it, it's best for her and her own mental clarity to step away. For Andrade, she is what we knew she was. She's a powerhouse. She's a tank. She's going to be exciting. I think we're going to see her rock a few more jaws in her career. I'm not convinced that she's going to be a long-standing dominant champ of this division, though. I thought she looked like she had a lot of holes last night, and she was really getting picked apart by the distance and speed and accuracy of Rose Namajunas. So, I don't think that she's the best, strongest, heavy wrestler in the division either. So, her as a champion of this division moving forward, I think she's got some. I think she's got a tough road to really be a long-standing champion here.
I agree with you. Just to put a cap on Rose and the Rose situation, women are a special case. I almost brought it up earlier in the conversation, talking about MMA has a short history, and there are starting to be examples of men, on the men's side, guys that, not everybody winds up a millionaire, from their pay-per-view buys. And, there are some cautionary tales are out there. And on the women's side, it is very unique and different. But you do already have the cautionary tale of Justino, Christiane Cyborg. Because for a long time, her whole talk was that she wanted to start a family, that she wanted to have a child, that she didn't want to rule it out. Now, I think she's in her mid-30s at this point, and she could still technically have a child, but she's put her body through a lot in training, the ups and downs of weight cutting and things like that, as well as I think she's had some steroids, in suspensions in her history as well and stuff. So she sacrificed a lot, and now she wants to have a baby. More power to her. Hopefully she, does it all the right way and stuff like that. But you can get caught up in this game, and as you pointed out, Rose at 26 still has her health and her money and her mind. If she can get her money together and she can walk away, there's no shame in that at all, not one bit. You don't want to be looking back and say, "Gee, I never had that kid," And unfortunately for Justino, that's something, as men, it's not really a great conversation to that we can empathize with it. But I certainly do think about how that deal how that aspect of the mindset is dealt with by women, because that's a pressure that's not dealt with on the men's side.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can go have kids and be able to train and compete throughout the whole 9 months that it's being formed. And, it doesn't take near the kind of toll on us physically as it does with a woman. So, and we see fighters having kids all the time, but you're not going to see an 8-month pregnant woman competing inside the octagon. So, but moving on to the co-main event, another sad moment in the long line of the post championship tenure of Anderson Silva. In my book, Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier gets his second. He's now 2-0 at middleweight, definitely making some noise here. Goes in and defeats Anderson the Spider Silva in Brazil. 44-year-old Anderson Spider the Silva, we should note. Late first round stoppage due to a leg kick that Cannonier landed that buckled Silva, looked like it blew his knee out. He had landed that same kick, to be fair to Cannonier, several times. Dropped Silva's invisible pain. It's the opposite leg this time from the one that he snapped around Chris Weidman's shin several years ago. Anderson Silva, I think this is going to be an injury that he might not be able to return from at this point in his career, unfortunately for him. Maybe not. He came back from snapping his shin in half, so we don't know. Jared Cannonier is looking better than he's ever looked before. The move to middleweight, he looks physically better. He looked very sharp. Did not seem at all rattled about being in Brazil and fighting a legend like Anderson Silva. One thing I have to note with this fight is I was disappointed in the Brazilian crowd. I thought that was very disrespectful to treat Cannonier like that when he was going in there doing his job. And he actually called him out on the microphone for that. And there's been a lot of fighters who don't really care to fight in Brazil because of that, because they're very hard on foreign fighters from what a lot of them have said. So I don't know how you felt about that, but a lot to talk about here. What were your thoughts, Miguel?
Yeah, I thought, unfortunately, we were wrong again. And this time, really unfortunately, because when we talked our way through Anderson Silva's fight with Cannonier, both of us concluded that we will probably see Silva again at some point. And one way or another, they probably look good. He's fighting at home. He's motivated, and this, that, and the other thing. And now, with the injury and stuff, that's probably the one scenario where hopefully we don't see him again. Hopefully, whatever comeback and rehab and stuff like that, he takes care of himself so he can walk and not limp and does that sort of stuff. But if he's aiming to come back again, I don't see why, unless he's really in dire financial straits and he still, would probably have some credence as a trainer or even a spokesperson in Brazil or something. I don't think he has to fight. So, yeah, I think we've seen the last of the Spider. I think it was a little sad to see him go out that way. I can tell you that I went to, I think it was like UFC 17 or right around that time was the first time they did a UFC Brazil. So I went to the very, very, very first one, and, I concur with what they say about the audience and stuff. The audience is going to be just completely pro-Brazilian, and once you're into a communication gap, because now if you're talking about like Joe Blow from the Brazil industry who loves their fighters and stuff like that, you might be talking about, no disrespect, but blue collar guys and stuff like that. There's nobody there who's going to be able to communicate with you in English. So now you're just talking about it doesn't go well, very emotional, Latin, hot blood kind of thing. So yeah, it can be something that you have to keep an eye on. It could be something if you have a high profile opponent, that pressure can come to you. You could be at the store at 1 a.m. buying a water, get recognized, and you got 3 guys yelling at you in Portuguese. And I'm not saying that there any risk or anything like that, but it's uncomfortable, and they will come up to you and yell at you and talk to you and this, that, and the other stuff. So I've seen it firsthand from the very first time in Brazil. That I've always thought it was a trip that, if you've done it once and you're going to go back and you know what you're going into, that's better. That first time, it's always an X factor how you're going to deal with it.
Yeah, and you could see that he was visibly not happy at all with it in his post-fight interview at all, and he had the good sense. Volkanovski and him had the good sense to not taunt the crowd like Colby Covington did and call them all dogs and stuff and get beer bottles and food thrown at him and escorted out with security, though. So props to him for not being a total moron and having some sense to not literally light a fire into the crowd, pour gasoline on an already stoked fire. And I think the crowd was a little bit reckless at this point in the evening. Brazil hadn't been having a good night at all.
No, drug saved the day. You know what I mean? They were having a bad day. Anderson Silva going out the way he did is even more of a bummer because it wasn't even like you got a fight out of it, or it was like, you know, they're kind of letting the air out of the bubble. And then the other fight we're going to talk about is José Aldo, who, you know, came in and, you know, drove the Ferrari at 40 miles an hour for 3 rounds.
Yeah, we can go ahead and switch there when this yeah, that was for what we've been seeing out of Aldo since his second loss to Max Holloway, his finish to Jeremy Stevens, and then his finish of Renato Moicano. This was anticlimactic to go down into Brazil, the King of Rio, they call him, and he never pulled the trigger in this fight. Volkanovski stayed in his face a little bit, but Volkanovski really didn't land too much on him. Aldo was defensively strong, but it was a very weak fight. Not one that's going to elevate their stock, either one of their stocks really all that much. I think Volkanovski may have just walked into a title fight, but I don't think people are any more excited about that than they were before this fight. He did get through Aldo, which was impressive, but as you said, this was kind of just Aldo. Aldo didn't show up.
Yeah, it could be, you know, the home field advantage can be a tricky character, I think. And, you know, at times, especially now in fights that are being couched as you're the legend, you're the superstar and stuff like that, you know, who knows what that pressure turns into. You know, in the States, you always hear the story of, like, you know, the guys make the NBA and all of a sudden, you know, guys from their high school calling them up asking for tickets and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it's like, how does that translate in a third world country where, you know, family becomes involved and, you know, there may be other financial needs and stuff like that. And Aldo would be perceived as wealthy. So that pressure may be a little bit of a bugaboo. And, you know, with Volkanovski, you know, I know he's Australian or New Zealand, you know, he's from the Oceania area and stuff like that, but he's a Russian at heart, which means he just doesn't give a fuck, really. It's, you know, at some point or another, if it's a fight, he'll show up. And, you know, he showed that he pressured Aldo the right way because Aldo, you know, he didn't really get off, kind of because, you know, Volkanovski had this weird kind of pressure on him where he just kept him out of his game the whole time. And I think Volkanovski mentioned a little bit about that in the post-fight interview where he expected that he wasn't going to get hurt in this fight because that he'd be able to stifle Aldo.
Yeah, what is your thoughts on Volkanovski going against Holloway now? Do you think he's got that pressure style, and Holloway does tend to take a round or two, get his range, get his combinations going? Volkanovski is solid everywhere. We didn't really get to see his wrestling too much in this fight. José Aldo's got a notoriously great takedown defense and notoriously good striking defense. So Volkanovski really wasn't able to show off a whole lot, but I think a 5-round fight is going to suit Volkanovski. I think that's going to be something he's going to be even better at. I think he's going to be somebody that's going to get stronger as the fight goes. I think that he could be a live dog against Max Holloway.
We'll see. I mean, to me, the bottom line is what Max are we going to get? Are we going to get the Max that, you know, could be questionable up and through the weigh-ins and stuff, and all of a sudden he's doing interviews and being wacky because, you know, he's not reacting well to the weight cut, you know? So is he not a true 45er anymore? If you get him back at 45, and, for example, the version even that fought Poirier, who really Poirier is on his way to 170 at some point, you know, he's huge. But if you get that version of Max Holloway, the guy who fought Poirier last fight, he beats Volkanovski because Volkanovski I don't think is going to be. I think it'll be Holloway who picks up the pressure on him and picks him apart as the fight goes on and extends itself. Because it's Holloway who's got a real good proven track record of upping the volume of his striking as the fight goes on, especially if he's doing well. So I don't know. If Volkanovski hurts him early, breaks through and hurts him early and puts him on his back foot the way Poirier did, you might see a very similar fight. I just don't know if at 45, it really depends on Holloway's ability to continue making 45 and do it in a healthy fashion. If he can do it in a healthy fashion, he's one of the top guys, and power-wise, the difference won't be that great with Volkanovski. Will be stronger probably, but not as strong as Poirier was. So I don't see him as being that huge a threat. I would favor Holloway there, but Volkanovski, I picked against him with Aldo. So if he continues on his run, maybe we've got a little bit of a Conor McGregor thing where all of a sudden he's just has to change some of the doubters over because he just keeps winning.
Yeah, I don't think the big loser when it comes to this, the indirect loser is Frankie Edgar. Probably just lost any chance he had to get a possible title fight with Max Holloway because I think if anybody gets it now going forward, it's probably going to be Volkanovski. And we mentioned going forward that we got these two big featherweight fights that were announced. We had Aldo and Volkanovski scheduled for last night, but they announced Zabit and Ortega. Well, we do now have a new fresh contender at featherweight for Holloway and Volkanovski. If he, as you mentioned, if he does stay down there, if Zabit's able to get through Ortega, we have another one. So that could shake up this division a lot, bring some new faces in it. And I think Aldo is going to take some time off now. He's talked about stepping away. He doesn't want to just become a journeyman. He's been around for so long, and I think he could be somebody that we also see step away at least for a while. He might come back for a certain specific fight or just one to just kind of get that itch scratched a year or two down the line, or maybe go do some other things like he's talked about boxing and all this. But I think José Aldo is doing good, and I think he's content with his career. He's had a fantastic career, and it was disappointing to see him lose in Brazil, but he has nothing to be ashamed of with his career. But going on to the Bellator card, Miguel, we saw in the main event, Patricio Pitbull now becomes the second two-weight division champion in Bellator currently, with Ryan Bader being the other one. Gets a first-round knockout loss to Michael Chandler. And just for the record, this was my first losing wage rage night since we've wage rage week since we've been doing that. Went 1-4 on the night, so a lot of unexpected results my way. But first round knockout. A lot of people are complaining about the stoppage. Chandler did seem pretty stunned. I'm not complaining about it too much. I mean, maybe Chandler could have fought through it. Maybe the ref could have been a little bit more lenient. But I do want to talk a little bit about Patricio Pitbull, though. He is very underrated, and I think he has a serious argument as quite possibly Bellator's best fighter. And I say that because of the longevity that he has been in Bellator. And now he's a two-division champion, featherweight and lightweight. I'm looking it up right now. He's been around since Bellator 15 back in 2010. So this is a Bellator-groomed prospect, which is what they need. He's had a few losses. He lost to Joe Warren, split decision. Pat Curran, split decision. Daniel Strauss, decision. And he had a leg injury against Benson Henderson, who's a big 55er. He's fought at 170. But other than that, he's avenged the Daniel Strauss losses. He avenged the Curran loss. And now he goes up and knocks out Chandler. This has been a guy who, when you really compare his resume, very overlooked. He's been a solid feather in Bellator for quite a while. Definitely could be a solid contender in the UFC. And now he goes up and he becomes a two-division champion, beating another one of their top fighters in Michael Chandler, who a lot of people think is one of their best fighters, could definitely compete in the UFC. I think this is a very big win for Patricio Pitbull. I'm excited to see where he goes from here. I think they're going to probably run this back. Maybe, maybe not. He's going out talking about wanting to box Canelo, which I don't think that's going to happen. But Patricio Pitbull, very underrated fighter. This was a big win for him. I think that he is somebody that could definitely be a serious contender in the UFC. And I don't know if he's going to hold on to that 45 belt. I don't know if he's going to, or if he's going to let it go. I don't know what his plans are at this point. Very solid fighter, always exciting, and I'm happy for him. And then the other big result of the evening was the co-main event. Douglas Lima advances to the welterweight Grand Prix final by a second-round knockout of Bellator upstart. A lot of hype behind him, Michael Venom Page. Michael Venom Page, a lot of fanfare, a lot of social media videos, very flashy, a lot of showboating, a lot of flashy kickboxing techniques. Always been known for having some serious high-level striking, and he ends up getting tripped up with a leg kick, and Douglas Lima puts him out. I knew going in that Lima was going to have a lot of power that Michael Venom Page hasn't fought against, and was going to be an overall more complete fighter than anybody he's probably ever fought against. I think this was Douglas Lima's biggest win. I think he's now the favorite to win this Grand Prix with Rory McDonald's performance against John Fitch in hindsight. And on top of that, Rory McDonald's mental issues that he's been out there talking about. He doesn't seem mentally like he's really in the fight anymore. Although he has come out and said that he will fight Nyman Gracie in the semifinal match. I thought John Fitch beat him. I think Nyman Gracie's a little bit better than what a lot of people are expecting. I thought going into this that Rory McDonald was definitely the favorite to win this all, but it turns out, he didn't really look good, and you got to wonder how much those wars with guys like Robbie Lawler took out of him back in his UFC days, and how much mentally it affected him getting just completely outclassed trying to become a two-division champion in Bellator by going up and fighting Gegard Mousasi. Got really beat up. So there's a lot of questions about Rory McDonald. So considering that and considering this performance by Lima and his finish with Koreshkov and the trilogy fight with them in the quarterfinal fight, I think that he's the favorite. I'm glad to see him getting his due. Same with Pitbull. These guys have been in Bellator for a long time, paid their dues. I think Douglas Lima is going to go on to win this tournament, become the welterweight champion, and I'm happy for him. He's a solid fighter. I think MVP will be back. I thought he looked very well in this fight, better than what I think a lot of people were expecting against a high-level fighter. It seemed like MVP was going to be a boom or bust in the sport, and I think that he's a solid fighter. I think he'll be back, and I think that he's. I like to see that we're talking about Bellator groomed in-house fighters in these two fights. You had Chandler and Pitbull, and you had MVP and Lima, and these are all Bellator guys. They're not UFC rejects, and I enjoy that with Bellator, and that's what Bellator needs. And one final note here that I definitely wanted to have Miguel here for, but Miguel gets cut off, and we can't control that. It happens. But big fight announcement was made yesterday that we found out basically right before the pay-per-view began. Nate Diaz returning to fight Anthony Showtime Pettis at UFC 241 August 17th in Anaheim. This will be on the undercard of the UFC heavyweight title fight between Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. And there was a lot of questions about when Diaz would come back, if he would come back. We know the Conor trilogy is always on the table, and it's always hard getting him into the negotiation table. The Diaz has been historic for really dragging on negotiations, but they got him to the table, And Miguel was right. I got to give, if he was here, I'd give him credit. I know he's going to watch it, so I'll give you credit, Miguel. You called it. It would be at 170. And these are two guys who have fought at 155 pounds for the majority of their division, majority of their career. Anthony Showtime Pettis goes up to 170 for the first time in his last fight and fights a top 5 guy. And Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, fight that a lot of people had. He was a big underdog in, knocks him out in the second round, gets one of the biggest finishes of his career. So now you got Anthony Pettis being a ranked top 10 welterweight in a stacked division, and you got Anthony Pettis coming out. I think this is a great fight, very interesting fight, and big name value. I think there's going to be a lot of fan interest in this. I think this is perfect strategy by the UFC to get them in there underneath a big heavyweight title fight, maybe the best 2 heavyweights the UFC's ever had. So I think it's a great fight. We're going to have a lot to talk. We're going to have a lot of months to talk about this, and we're going to be talking about it for leading up to this for the next couple months. But Nate Diaz, he's back going against Anthony Showtime Pettis, two veterans of the sport. And with that, subscribe, like, share here on the CRP. We cover a lot of content. We're here covering stuff every week consistently. We're getting you ready for the cards coming up. We're reviewing what just happened. We're projecting into the future. We're bringing you the big fight announcements. Miguel's here giving you odds. And him and Anthony are covering boxing. We're giving you predictions. We've been very solid on our wage rage pick. This week was one of our worst weeks for me, at least, going 1-4. But it happens. You win some, you lose some. But like our content, we're getting better. I hope you enjoy our look. I hope you enjoy our sound. I hope you enjoy our conversations. We try to talk about things that a lot of people won't. And hope you enjoy the Cage Rage podcast. We're going to get back to our history podcasts here soon. We're going to keep covering the rise and fall of Pride. We're going to be talking about Kazuichi Sakuraba coming up soon. So stay tuned to the Cage Rage podcast. This is Devin signing off. Talk to you next time.